How do our trials point us to Christ? I think the best way to answer this question is to point to one of my heroes, Charles Spurgeon. Spurgeon was a pastor in London in the 19th century. God used him to do an incredible work in England and throughout the world. But he was a man who struggled with pain and depression all his life. He faced intense public slander. His wife, Susanna, was an invalid from her early 30s. She could rarely even attend church gatherings with her husband. Physical pain marked Spurgeon's own life. He struggled with intense and agonizing seasons of gout. His whole body just ached continuously. This man was in pain, and due to his pain and depression, he was actually out of the pulpit a third of the time. So how did Spurgeon persevere through all these trials? How did his trials point him to Christ? Well, a clue to his perseverance is the theology behind this quote that is often attributed to him. I have learned to kiss the wave that throws me against the rock of ages. Now, what did he mean by kiss the wave? Well, when I'm in the midst of struggling, I'm doing my best just to keep my head above the water as the waves of suffering just come crashing on me. I've often longed to be just lifted out of the rough and dark waters. I've never thought about kissing those damaging and hurtful waves. No, I don't think Spurgeon is giving us trite advice, pretending as if suffering isn't difficult. I also don't think he's telling us to act as if our situations are easy. Just try harder. Just kiss those waves. No, I think Spurgeon is telling us that God is doing more in our suffering than we can see with our eyes. Now, none of us enjoy suffering. We want out. And yet God in his grace uses suffering for our good. Now, Spurgeon has good advice for us. Stop flailing your arms in panic for a minute and embrace the God who has sovereignly designed your circumstances. Kiss the wave. Now, in the midst of the storm, God has your good and his glory in mind. Our trials are actually meant to point us to Christ if we let them. Redeemer Church, whether it's financial or physical pain, whether it be emotional or spiritual depression, whether it's anxiety or sleeplessness, whatever you may be going through, don't run from God. Don't run to the things of this world. Instead, let your trials actually carry you to God, like the wave carries the water to shore. Look to him. He is there. Our trials point us to Christ by showing that we are ultimately dependent on him for all things. Our pain reminds us that God is in control. Our trials bring us to a greater dependence upon him. Our trials deepen our prayers, and they urge us to rely on our church community for help. Now, ultimately, our suffering reminds us that God is good, that he is at work to produce maturity in our hearts. Romans 8:28 is not just a verse for a Christian greeting card, but it's a verse we should have branded on our hearts. And we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to his purpose. Even our trials, however bad they may be, God is using them for good. So in the midst of your pain, look up. Look up. Jesus is there. Embrace him and let the wave of your trials carry you to him.